The classroom on Station Virel 9 was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the starship engines vibrating beneath the floor. Rows of alien students sat upright, their multicolored skin glowing softly under the white lights. They were the brightest. Minds from dozens of worlds, chosen to study intergalactic history under the famous Professor Kohler. Today's topic was Earth, a small blue planet in the Sol system. Most of them barely paid attention as the holoboard lit up with the image of Earth, another backwater world, one student whispered to his neighbor. The others giggled. Earth had no major seat on the Galactic Council, no major exports, no diplomatic influence. To them, it was just an overlooked primitive rock. Even its name was unimpressive. Professor Kohler raised a brow. She had taught for over 900 cycles, but she always warned others not to underestimate certain species. She tapped the board, and the class went silent. Today, she began, you will understand why Earth is called a Deathworld, and why we study them with caution, not arrogance. The first clip showed a dense jungle. A human male crept silently with nothing but a knife. His skin was soaked in sweat, his movements slow and controlled. Without warning, a massive predator leapt from the trees, but the human ducked and drove his blade upward in one smooth motion. The predator dropped dead in seconds. The students leaned forward. Some gasped. They don't use claws or natural armor, Professor Kohler explained. They rely on strategy. They hunt things that hunt them. From childhood, they learn pain, fear, and how to survive both. The clip changed again. This time, a city was burning. Human soldiers ran through the smoke. Some were dragging wounded, others returning fire with makeshift weapons. Above them, alien ships hovered, dropping bombs. This wasn't an invasion. It was an experiment one. The council had tried to keep hidden, nearly 70 cycles ago. The professor said, a minor galactic faction thought Earth would be easy to test military technology on. They believed humans would fall within days. Instead, Earth turned into a war they couldn't afford. One student raised a trembling hand. But Earth has no warp drives, no energy shields. How could they fight back? Professor Kohler smiled, but there was no humor in it. With everything, including themselves, the footage now showed a group of human engineers building weapons from scrap. Another clip showed a boy no older than 10 throwing a rock at a drone. His face was bruised, but his eyes were fire. They don't give up, even when they should, even when it's hopeless. Humans fight like cornered animals, but worse. Because they learn while bleeding, the class fell into deep silence. Several students shifted in their seats. One, a green-skinned Avixi, whispered, that can't be real. The professor turned. You're welcome to visit Earth and find out yourself. But only if you're ready to never sleep the same again. Suddenly, the room lights flickered. A signal came through the station system. Emergency report from Sector 43 Tau. Unknown ship intercepted. Human signature confirmed. Requesting backup. The class froze. Professor Kohler's face darkened. It seems your lesson is about to go beyond theory. They moved quickly. The class was escorted to the observation deck, which overlooked the deep space defense perimeter. Outside the transparent dome, the void stretched forever, lit only by stars and the occasional flash of station lights. And then it appeared, a single human vessel, small, outdated, no weapons detected. And yet, every ship in the sector had been called in to respond. Why? Because it wasn't the size that mattered. It was the flag it bore, Earth's emblem. A reminder of the old war. Inside the control room, officers argued over protocols. They might be scouts or survivors from an old sleeper ship. But if they're here on purpose, the commander cut him off. Then we pray it's a misunderstanding. We do not provoke humans, not anymore. The students watched the ship slowly drift closer. Some pressed their hands to the glass. Others backed away. They had come to laugh at Earth, to study its failures. But what they found instead was something different. Something dangerous. One of the youngest students turned to the professor. Why did the galaxy stop fighting them? Professor Kohler didn't look away from the ship. Because Earth doesn't lose. It just takes time to understand what it's fighting for, and once it does, it becomes unstoppable. The ship stopped just outside the outer ring. A signal was received. Only 3 words translated through the system. We remember everything. The class stared, unblinking. For the first time they understood. Earth didn't need to boast. It didn't need to invade. It only needed to be provoked. Once. After that, it became legend. And legends, they were now learning, are often written in blood. Asterisk. The ship floated silently outside the observation dome, as if waiting. Its hull was scratched, parts of it patched together from different old designs. Yet it gave off a strange pressure, a feeling that it was not just a vessel, but a warning. Inside the classroom, no one spoke. Even the usual loud ones sat still, their eyes locked on the dark shape beyond the stars. Professor Kohler finally turned away from the glass. Now you see why I never joke about Earth, she said, her voice calm but heavy. The signal repeated. We remember everything. Simple words, but in them 1,000 battles screamed. 1,000 names, forgotten by the galaxy, still burned in human memory. They did not forget. And they never truly forgave. Some students started whispering to each other. Why come now? What do they want? Maybe they're just exploring. But deep inside, none of them believed that. Not anymore. Earth didn't explore lightly. Earth didn't arrive without a reason. A light blinked on the professor's wrist console. She checked it, frowned, and spoke to the class. We've been given permission to attend the docking. The humans have requested a meeting with observers from the academy present. There was a pause. One student raised his voice. You want us to go near that thing? His tone was sharp, laced with fear. Kohler only nodded. Knowledge requires risk. If you're afraid of it, you don't belong in this class. A transport was arranged. The students boarded with tight jaws and nervous glances. As the shuttle approached the dock, the tension grew. The closer they got, the more they could see the ship's strange design. It was a mix of beauty and brutality. A reflection of the species that built it. The airlock opened. A single human stepped out. Male, tall, dressed in a black uniform with no weapons in sight. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp, and his expression unreadable. He looked around slowly, then spoke. I'm Captain Elias Ward. I was told this is a place of learning. No one answered right away. Then the station commander stepped forward and welcomed him. The human's eyes scanned the students. You've been studying Earth, he said, more like a statement than a question. Then let me offer you a live lecture. The students followed him through the docking hall and into a neutral conference chamber. The human walked ahead with a steady pace, like he owned every hallway he passed. There was no arrogance in his steps, just experience. Inside the room, he stood before them and activated a hollow projector. Images filled the air, scenes of Earth's history, many of them unknown to the galaxy. Not just wars, famines, earthquakes, disease, ice ages, extinctions. And through it all, humanity survived. Earth, he began, taught us one thing. Survival isn't about comfort. It's about endurance. We don't live long. We aren't born strong. But we keep getting back up. One of the students asked carefully, why come here now? Ward turned his head slightly. Because some of your scientists poked an old satellite in Jupiter's orbit. A warning beacon from our side of the galaxy. We noticed. We tracked the signal. And now I'm here to remind you, stay away from the darker places of Earth's history. Some things were buried for good reason. A green-skinned student leaned forward. But, you're not angry? Ward chuckled, a low sound that made some of them flinch. Angry? No. We're past that, but curious? Always. We wanted to see if your academies teach truth or propaganda. So far, I'm impressed. Your professor seems to understand what most forget. Professor Kohler nodded slowly. I was on a diplomatic ship during the Reversal War. I saw what humans could do without advanced tech. It changed how I teach forever. Ward's expression softened for the first time. Then you're one of the few who deserves our respect. He ended the session with one final clip. It showed a massive alien warship crashing on a mountainside. And at the base of the mountain, a small team of humans injured, exhausted, but alive, salvaging tech and preparing for another day of battle. The title of the footage read, "They thought we'd surrender. We thought they underestimated us. We were both right and wrong." The screen faded. The silence was thick. The students looked at each other with new eyes. Not as competitors, but as witnesses to a truth they hadn't been prepared for. Ward stood. "We don't expect friendship. We don't expect fear. We expect honesty. And for those who offer it, humanity offers peace. The others, well, ask history." With that, he turned and walked back toward his ship. No guards, no backup. He didn't need them. His presence had already left a message louder than any weapon. The students remained seated for minutes after he left. No one moved, no one spoke. They had come to mock Earth. Now they would leave changed. For the first time, they truly understood why the galaxy called Earth a Deathworld. Because it earned the name. And because those who forget that truth always pay for it. The next day, the academy was quieter than usual. The students walked through the halls in silence, some glancing nervously toward the docking bay. Word of the human visitor had spread through the entire station. Even the instructors looked uneasy. Professor Kohler stood alone in her classroom, staring at the now dark holoboard. The words, "We remember everything," echoed in her mind. She knew the human captain had spoken calmly, but there had been something sharp behind his words. Like a blade hidden under soft cloth. One by one, her students entered. Their usual excitement was gone. There was no laughter, no teasing. They sat down quietly, some avoiding eye contact. Others looked straight ahead, trying to act normal. But their eyes betrayed the truth. They had seen something yesterday that couldn't be unseen. Kohler began the lesson as if nothing had changed. Today, we review the war strategies developed during the Earth conflicts. This is not to glorify violence, but to understand what desperation creates when mixed with intelligence. The board lit up again, showing schematics of old human traps. Simple tools, wires, pressure plates, nothing fancy. But each one was designed to work against advanced alien drones. Not by overpowering them, but by outthinking them. These traps, Kohler explained, were built from garbage. But they cost the Xanthari Armada hundreds of lives. Why? Because humans don't fight the way we do. They observe, they adapt. And most dangerously, they anticipate. A student raised his hand. Why didn't the Xanthari just destroy the whole planet? Kohler didn't answer right away. Then she brought up a new holofeed. It showed footage of a ruined Xanthari mothership. Hull torn open, internal fires, crew floating lifeless in space. Because by the time they tried, Earth had already learned how to reach them. She paused, letting that settle in. The classroom door opened suddenly. An academy security officer entered, nodded to Kohler, and handed her a device. Her eyes scanned the text. Then she turned to the class. "Change of plan. We have been invited aboard the human ship. Captain Ward has offered to show us something." Personally, there was a ripple of discomfort through the students. Some shook their heads. A few whispered arguments started. One student stood up. "Why should we go? Isn't this a trap?" Kohler raised her hand, quieting them. "You fear what you don't understand. But fear is not an excuse to stay ignorant. I'm going. Those who wish to join me may come." The rest will stay here and write a full report on Earth's military history by tonight. Nearly every student stood. The human ship's interior was dimly lit and lined with metal panels scarred by age and use. It wasn't elegant like the Academy ships. It was built for function, not beauty. And yet, the student sensed a strength in its design, a raw lived-in power. Captain Ward was waiting. He nodded once and motioned them toward a sealed door. This room is restricted to non-hostile observers only. What you see inside may change your view of history. Permanently, the doors slid open. Inside, it wasn't a weapon bay or a prison cell. It was a memorial room. Walls covered with names, faces, old photographs, children, soldiers, scientists, farmers, each one a human who had died during the war. Ward stepped forward. We carry this with us, always, every ship, every outpost. These are the people who bought us time, who gave us the chance to fight back. And we don't forget their sacrifice. Not even 1,000 years from now. One of the students moved closer to a photograph of a young woman in a spacesuit. Her smile was warm. Her eyes were bright. Below it, a caption read, "Died disabling a gravity bomb before it reached the Earth colony orbit." Age, 19. She was just a student, the alien whispered. Ward nodded. Most of them were. But they became soldiers when they had to. And that is what Earth creates. Survivors who refuse to die quietly. The students stood in silence. No one mocked, no one spoke. For once, they understood Earth not as a myth or a threat, but as a memory carried by those who lived through fire and loss. Ward finally turned to leave. You asked why Earth is feared. It's not because we are the strongest. It's because we remember what it's like to be weak, and we never want to be there again. Professor Kohler bowed her head slightly. Thank you, Captain, I believe. Your lesson reached deeper than any of our own. The door closed behind them as they left the ship. But the images inside stayed with them, long after they returned to the Academy. Long after the human ship drifted silently back into the stars. They had come to study Earth from a distance. Now Earth had reached into their minds and left something behind. Not fear, not anger, but understanding. And perhaps, for the first time in galactic history, respect. Asterisk news of the human memorial room spread faster than any official report. In the Academy mess halls, dormitories, and simulation centers, students whispered about the faces they saw on the ship's walls. Every alien species in the class felt something new, an unfamiliar weight in their chest. They had all studied war in theory. They had run simulations and calculated losses. But seeing the human way of remembrance changed everything. Earth didn't see war as victory or defeat, it saw it as sacrifice. And sacrifices were never forgotten. For days the students behaved differently. They paid closer attention. They questioned less with sarcasm and more with sincerity. Professor Kohler noticed. She had seen this once before, during her first contact mission with humans. The deeper one looked at Earth, the harder it became to look away. The human ship still hovered nearby, silent as the stars. Captain Ward had not left another message. He didn't need to. His visit had already done what centuries of lectures couldn't. But something else was coming, and the humans, as always, were prepared before anyone else noticed. An alert rang through the station one evening. It was sharp, sudden, and louder than usual. A ripple of tension spread across every corridor. Students ran to their windows. Staff rushed to terminals. The outer sensors had picked up an unknown signal, unmarked vessel. No response to hails, moving fast. Too fast. Station defenses were raised. Fighter drones deployed. Academy security teams took position. The students were told to return to their quarters, but a few, including those in Kohler's class, stayed behind. Hiding near the observation deck, they watched as the mysterious ship pierced through sensor range. It wasn't large. but it moved with purpose. Then something unexpected happened. The human ship activated and positioned itself between the station and the threat. Kohler arrived moments later. She didn't send the students away. She knew they needed to see this. Captain Ward's ship didn't fire. Instead, it sent a direct transmission to the unknown vessel. No one knew what it said. There was no translation. But a moment later, the intruding ship stopped. Then, after a long pause, it turned around and jumped back into deep space. The room was silent. The human ship returned to its original position. Still quiet, still watching. An officer on the bridge whispered, "How did they do that?" Another said, "That wasn't power, that was reputation." Professor Kohler turned to her students. Earth understands something many of us forget. Sometimes, fear prevents war more than firepower. And respect prevents fear better than anything else. That night, the Academy held an emergency council meeting. Kohler was invited to speak. The topic wasn't the intruder, it was Earth, and what to do with the knowledge they now had. Some instructors were still skeptical. "They are dangerous," one said. "We should monitor them." Another countered, "They saved us without firing a shot. Doesn't that count for something?" Kohler stood at the center. She didn't raise her voice. The humans don't ask for trust. They don't demand loyalty. They ask for space. And when that space is violated, they act swiftly. Their peace is not weakness. It is earned and guarded with memory. The council voted to leave the human ship unchallenged. It was a small decision, but a meaningful one. Respect would replace suspicion. For now, back in the classroom, the students talked openly for the first time. Not just about humans, but about their own species. Their own wars. Their own ignorance. One student from the Zeltrax colony admitted, "We thought Earth was just a cautionary tale. Now I think, maybe we were the cautionary tale for them." Another whispered, "What do you think would have happened if that unknown ship attacked?" Kohler answered without hesitation, "Then you would have seen why Earth earned the name Deathworld, not because of its monsters, but because of the humans who learned to outlive them." As the class ended, one student stayed behind. She was from a peaceful water world known for diplomacy. She looked at Kohler with serious eyes. "Will we ever be like them?" The professor considered the question, then shook her head. "No, and that's the point. We are not meant to become like them. We are meant to understand them. That's how peace survives." Far outside the academy, drifting near the void, the human ship powered down once more. Silent, still, unmoving. But everyone on Station Varel 9 now understood something vital. Silence was not absence. Stillness was not weakness, and peace, in the hands of humanity, was the quiet before thunder. The next few days passed without alarm. Patrol routes resumed. Drones returned to their stations. But the students on Varel 9 were no longer the same. Something inside them had shifted. They weren't just curious about Earth anymore, they were humbled by it. In the Academy simulation halls, training scores began to rise. Not because students had stronger weapons, but because they started thinking differently. They used patience, misdirection, and survival tactics. It wasn't something they were taught directly. It was something they picked up from watching humans. Professor Kohler noticed the change and smiled to herself. The human lesson hadn't been about fear. It had been about respect, sacrifice, and preparation. And these students finally had learned that lesson. One morning, Captain Ward sent a final message. No words, only a single file. It contained a journal entry from a human soldier named Leon Cross. It was dated during the final days of the reversal. War. The students gathered to read it together. We ran out of ammo 2 days ago. Food ran out the day before that. Half of us are wounded. No one's coming. But we won't surrender. Not because we're brave. Because if we die here, it will mean someone else gets one more day. And that's enough. The room was quiet after. Reading it, one student asked softly, "Did she survive?" Professor Kohler nodded. Yes, and she became the first human ambassador to the Zerel Dominion, one of the same species that once tried to destroy her unit, that hit the students hard. Not just the survival, the forgiveness, the ability to move forward without forgetting the past. That was something very few species could master. Later that evening, the human ship began to move. Slowly at first, then accelerating toward deep space. It didn't say goodbye. It didn't send coordinates. It just vanished beyond the stars. But it left something behind. A small capsule, dropped gently into orbit near the station. The council retrieved it and brought it inside. Inside was a cube, glowing faintly with blue light. When activated, it displayed Earth's landscape, its oceans, mountains, deserts, and cities. It wasn't a threat. It was a gift. On the bottom of the cube, 3 words were etched in Galactic common. "Study us honestly." That became the new motto of Kola's classroom. The old Earth files were removed and replaced with fresh data. Not just war records, art, music, culture, struggles, moments of peace. True understanding began when Earth was seen as a whole, not just as a battlefield. One student wrote in her report, "Earth is not terrifying because it's violent. Earth is terrifying because it survives, creates, and heals after the violence. And it doesn't lose itself in doing so." The Academy soon updated its interstellar curriculum. Earth was no longer listed under low-influence civilizations. It was now in a category of its own, resilient species of strategic importance. But titles didn't matter to the students anymore. They had felt something no textbook could offer. And that feeling stayed with them long after the lesson ended. Months passed. Graduation day arrived. The once young students now stood taller, more aware of the galaxy's real complexities. During the ceremony, one of the highest honors was given to a student named Lixer, who had originally mocked Earth the most. He stepped up to receive his medal and said only one thing: "I thank the humans for teaching me what my own people couldn't." The audience applauded. Professor Kohler watched from the side, pride in her eyes. She knew she had done her part. Not by shielding the students from the truth, but by showing them how to face it. Years later, some of those same students would become diplomats, commanders, teachers, and explorers. Many would face dangers across the stars. And in their toughest moments, they would remember one simple phrase: "We remember everything," not as a threat, but as a promise to never forget what made survival meaningful. And in the far corner of deep space, long past the range of station sensors, a lone human vessel drifted under dark skies. Inside, Captain Ward stood at a viewport, watching a star collapse into a black hole. His crew waited behind him, silent and alert. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply turned, nodded to his navigator, and whispered, "Let's see what the rest of them remember." Years passed since the human ship visited Station Viral 9. But its presence never truly left. The memorial, the message, the silence, it had become a chapter in every academy across the quadrant. Earth was no longer just a topic in war history. It was now the most studied planet in the advanced curriculum. Professor Kohler had since retired. Her class, once filled with nervous, careless students, had spread out across the galaxy. Some served on border fleets, others entered diplomacy or research. But each of them carried a part of Earth's truth within them. A warning, a guide, a memory. Among them was Lixer, now a high-ranking envoy to the Trinari cluster. He stood in front of a large screen in a peace summit chamber. Alien leaders argued around him. Tensions were rising between 3 star systems. He raised his hand and spoke calmly. "You're not listening to each other. That's how wars begin. I once learned from a world that barely survived its own self-destruction. And still, it chose peace when war was easier. Earth taught me that. Courage is sometimes just listening first." the room quieted. A few diplomats scoffed, but others listened. They had heard of Earth too. The name carried weight now. Not because of ships or soldiers, but because of the stories. Stories that echoed louder than weapons ever could. Meanwhile, deep in Sector 97, a dead zone avoided by most unrest was building. Pirates, warlords, and scavenger fleets had started claiming abandoned stations. One by one, systems fell silent. The Galactic Council formed a task force, but it was too late. A hostile coalition known as the Deathworld had already begun to spread. Ships went missing. Colonies were burned. No species was spared. The Council debated, delayed, and struggled to form a united response. But then, something strange happened. A Dirac ship attacked a mining vessel in the Oral Belt. The ship was not marked as military. No distress call made it through. But 3 days later, the Dirac's flagship was found drifting empty, systems offline, no sign of battle. A single word had been burned into its hull: observed. Rumors spread fast. Some said it was a rogue AI. Others believed it was a rival faction. But those who had studied Earth, the students, the historians, the few who knew better, they whispered something else. The humans were watching again, on a far moon orbiting a dying red star. A small team of Council scientists uncovered a forgotten outpost. Inside were data logs from the Reversal War, hidden blueprints, battle footage, coordinates long thought erased. Among the files was a message, time-stamped only weeks earlier. You forgot what we buried. We didn't. It had Earth's encryption signature. Panic returned to the Council chambers. Warnings were raised. But this time, no one mocked Earth, no one doubted. The Dirac sent out feelers, but no one returned from those missions. It was as if something unseen was sweeping across their dark empire, removing only what it judged unacceptable. Eventually, Captain Elias Ward's name surfaced again, only this time, not in news reports. In coded transmissions, in broken data. Always the same message. Peace is a choice, but so is memory. Back on Station Virel 9, a new class gathered for Professor Kola's farewell event. She stood slowly, older now, but with eyes still sharp. A student asked her what humanity had truly wanted back then. Why had they come to a classroom full of children? She smiled gently, to see if the future had learned anything. To see if knowledge could stop history from repeating. They didn't need to threaten us. They just needed us to understand why they endured. The student looked down. And did we? Kohler looked out the window, where stars stretched into forever. I believe some of us did. I believe that's why the galaxy still stands. Far away, where no telescope reached, a fleet moved through shadows. No banners, no noise, only purpose. At the head of it, a small old ship. Captain Ward's ship led the way, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to protect what had once been offered. Peace with a warning, because Earth never wanted war. But if war came, humanity would remind the stars why it had once been called a death world. And this time, they would not need to speak it. The galaxy already knew.